Hello and welcome to WJ Live, powered by the Western Journal. I'm Michael Austin, a supervising reporter for the Western Journal. Today we're joined by our very own columnist, Cameron Arcand.
Thank you for having me.
Western Journal fame. And then we got Tara Snyder, of course, from the assignment team here at the Western Journal. We got a lot of good stuff for you guys today. A lot of news coming out of, surprise, surprise, Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Situation continues to devolve and barrel out of control. We're going to be talking about the State Department leaving U.S. citizens stranded there, the Taliban taking control of, millions, probably billions of dollars worth of equipment?
Billions.
How much?
I'm
Billions.
going to go with billions.
Billions of dollars worth of U.S. military equipment, weapons, vehicles, everything. And we also have some news on the Kabul bomber and how he possibly could have been stopped. But first, we'll start with the State Department leaving behind U.S. citizens in Afghanistan, in Taliban-controlled country. There's a report that came out of The Intercept that we later covered on the Western Journal this past week. This former Afghan resident who was a interpreter for the U.S. Armed Forces. He was a great ally to us. He did us right. He did right by us. He became a U.S. citizen in 2019, and then just days ago, the State Department just left him in the wind. They just left him in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is targeting. They want to murder people like him. Anyone who worked with Western forces, and all the interpreters, they kind of have had a target on their back, and they've been persecuted even before we finished our exit. And what's really shocking about this story, and this man's name is Prince Wafa. I apologize if I'm pronouncing the name wrong. I'm not, I'm not very fluent in a lot of the languages native to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
but Wafa, he had called the State Department, days before Biden pulled all the troops out. He asked them, look, what am I going to do? I'm here with my wife. We're both in danger. The Taliban's going to come. They're going to murder us both. And a State Department official talked to him on the phone and said, look, shelter in place right now. We have a plan. We're going to get you out. We're going to get everyone out of Afghanistan. Every U.S. citizen is going to get out. So just shelter in place, wait 24 hours, and we're going to call you back. So he waits a day, and then the next morning, he wakes up, he turns on the TV, and what does he see? He sees Biden bragging about how successful the evacuation effort was, except one tiny problem.
Yeah.
He was still there.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and so obviously, frantically, he calls the State Department back. He's like, guys, what is happening? What am I supposed to do? They talk for a few minutes, and then basically the conversation ends with the State Department official saying, I'm sorry, it looks like we don't actually have a plan for you today, so just keep sheltering in place. And then he hung up on the man that Biden left stranded in Afghanistan.
Wow. And
it's been amazing. There's been all kinds of different reports in terms of how many people have been left behind. It seems like it's been a couple hundred, 200 at the most, from a lot of the numbers I've seen. I heard from some sources today that it's as many as 1,000. I've only heard that in one place, so I'm not necessarily sure that's true. But regardless, the number is in the hundreds. So it's been ridiculous. And what's been really shocking to me is seeing places like the Washington Post, places like the New York Times. They've actually called out the president for this. They've actually called out Biden for leaving people behind. And it's just after months and months and months of never seeing, forget months, after years of never seeing the media establishment ever being critical of a Democrat leader. It's amazing to see this reversal. And I just wanted to throw this to you guys and just say, is the situation just so bad that they can't cover it up anymore? Or has something else changed? Why are they starting to turn on Biden a little bit here?
Well, I have two theories. The first is that the media obviously thrives on outrage. As long as they have something to sell you, as long as they have something that's going to spark something in your brain that says, oh, I need to share this, why aren't people talking about it? They're always going to go for that. Now, this kind of bleeds into my second theory, which says that they created a media sphere that was completely focused on Donald Trump. Now that Donald Trump's gone, they don't have that person to push at every single day. And so now they're actually forced to do their jobs and go, oh, wait, this actually went down south pretty bad. And finally, they have to cover it because he screwed up on the world stage at a national level, and there's no way you can cover it up. This is world policy. This isn't some social justice warrior movement.
And I like kind of what you're getting at there, which is basically in news, it's always best to be kind of the opposition, to be the people that are opposite of the ruling class, to be holding the ruling class accountable. That's why all of those outlets were so successful during the Trump years. And it's also why so many of them are like firing hundreds of employees during the Biden years. So do you think, Cameron, do you think that's what's playing into this, is that, their numbers are bleeding, they need to produce some sort of good content, and so, okay, we're going to be critical of the president even though he's a Democrat.
Yeah, and I think there's also an aspect of, I don't think any objective person can look at this and say, not that I'm accusing the media of being objective, I think that's way out of question with a lot of them, but I think the issue is, this is, on the practical end, you tell someone to shelter in place, you tell hundreds of Americans to do that. How is that doable? How do you do that in Afghanistan? I was joking in the office earlier. Is there a Motel 6? Is there an embassy suites that these people can go to? Is there Instacart? How are these people surviving right now is what I want to know, when there is such a high risk. Now, kind of going into the media end of that, I think there really is a lot of individual stories that are going to be coming out about the people that are left behind in Afghanistan right now. And I think the media does have, we right-wing, left-wing, whatever media you are, do have an obligation to cover these stories, because what happened was we not only left our own people behind, we left people that helped us behind too. And we're going to see a lot of those issues as well. So the Biden administration completely messed this up, this whole process, and they're touting it as a success. Maybe if this was an emergency withdrawal of troops, it would have been a success, but that's not what happened. If the Taliban woke up one day and decided, hey, we're going to take over Afghanistan, this would be a different story. But when you had deadlines planned for months and months of planning that could have gone into this to withdraw the troops, that's where the big issue is that this was supposed to be planned, and now we're not seeing that.
And it can't be overstated how much of a threat the Taliban poses, because the Biden administration has kind of tried to sell us the idea that the Taliban is a little more, a little softer than they used to be, not quite as radical. But, we interviewed someone who was on the ground in Kabul shortly before the evacuation ended, Tim Kennedy, former UFC fighter. He's a special forces operative. And he told us what the Taliban was actually like. And these are the quotes he gave us. They're brutes, they're gangsters, they burn people alive, they hang them from trees, they throw gays off rooftops, they throw acid on little girls trying to walk to school. They are a radical extremist organization that is violent. There's not an element that I have seen personally in 20 years that is characteristic that I can embrace as American from the Taliban. And he's also said that the things that he saw during his short time, during his few days in Kabul, were just horrifying beyond imagination. And this is a man who served for a long time in Afghanistan years ago. So that blows my mind. And these are the people that are coming after, citizens like Wafa that are stuck there. He risked his life to help us as an interpreter. Apparently, he loved our country so much that he decided to become a citizen, and we abandoned him after all of that sacrifice. So how do we get ourselves out of this? How do you guys think we can get these people out of Afghanistan? Because Biden's not going to send more people in. So what is the solution here?
Well, I think what's fascinating is that there are a lot of private rescue efforts going on, and that has just been something that I've been thinking about a lot, and we've done stories here at the Western Journal about these private operations that are happening and just how risky they are, and unconfirmed reports of individual congressmen trying to fly down there and figure out how to get their own people out. So there's a lot of things moving pieces to this going on. And I think those people are ultimately going to have to get out either through an organization or another private entity that would help get them out. But kind of aside from that, when we're talking about the nature of the Taliban, do you remember Malala?
Yeah. Yep.
And the girl who was shot going on her way to school.
Yeah.
And the world rallied around Malala a few years back. And for some reason, while we're talking about the Taliban, this story has been completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's been one of those things where when you have someone that became kind of an icon for kind of like this kind of global relations kind of progress in a sense, how did all of a sudden the Biden administration, who just throw all of that away, and now all of a sudden, and the world just kind of throw all this away, and now we're talking about working with the Taliban and just different things like that. How did we get to this
Possibly
point?
giving them aid.
I think it's kind of what you're saying is we got to a point where I think we kind of felt comfortable because we'd been there for 20 years, and anyone on the ground there can tell you this was a dangerous, hostile situation. We are an ocean away, so I think it's a lot easier to think, oh, that's the other side of the world. I don't really have to think about it. But then when you see 13 people die in a blast, it really wakes you up. And the thing that I would encourage people to remember is that only a few years ago did Obama make the deal to get the Gitmo 5 back out and free in exchange for one service member. And so if you're going to make that kind of a deal for one service member, you can't sit there and pretend that the Taliban is this hunky-dory little group of people who's just a little rough around the edges. It's absolutely ridiculous. But now we're abandoning thousands of people in Afghanistan. It just doesn't make sense.
Even if the numbers of Americans are in the hundreds, there are thousands of eligible Afghans. I mean, as far as the reports that I saw last that are still stuck there, that we probably should be getting home, but unfortunately we can't. And we've given the Taliban some, we've not made it easy for ourselves. We've given them quite a bit of assistance unintentionally by handing them over some of the best military equipment in the entire world.
Yeah, we gave them little goodie bags with Blackhawks and tanks and armored vehicles. It's great. It's really great. But the Al Arabiya News in Saudi Arabia reported that there were some images going around social media of U.S. armored military vehicles on their way to Iran. Now, I think we have a photo of this. This is an unconfirmed report right now, but it is aligning with kind of this greater topic that we've been discussing on this show and throughout the news, where we're seeing the Taliban use our military equipment and either give it to our adversaries or use it for their own use. Now, this kind of goes into a bigger thing about how Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, he's a retired military veteran, he told Breitbart the other day on a radio program that the Taliban is now going to be in a pretty lucrative business plan to sell our military equipment that was left behind to China and Russia so they could, quote, reverse engineer it. Now, if anyone's wondering why this happened, it was because we didn't do two things. We didn't equip the Afghan military, the one that we were allied with, to properly protect our equipment.
Yeah.
Now, the second thing that we didn't do is after we realized, hey, we didn't properly protect it, we didn't do airstrikes. We didn't destroy the equipment.
Yeah.
So basically, we just left it there. And they'll say, oh, some of this stuff is decommissioned, but a lot of it isn't.
Yeah.
And a lot of it could probably be repaired and be put back into use. So what we're seeing now is our equipment being sold and given to our enemies because the Taliban now has it. Now, at the very least, we can talk about confirmed, unconfirmed reports of these things, but what we know at the bare minimum is that the Taliban now has access to precious military equipment and, by extension, U.S. military secrets, because when we talk about certain things with our technology, a lot of that is secret information. A lot of that is things that are really what make the United States military the most powerful military in the world. And because now that they now have these pieces of information, essentially, our adversaries can now use that against us. Yeah. Now, what I first want to ask you guys is, What do you think the concern here is? What's the national security risk, whether it's involving Iran, the Taliban, China, Russia? What do you think is going to happen, if anything?
Well, Russia and China, I mean, that's the biggest threat right there. They're trying to further develop their military strength as much as possible right now, and having access to all that technology. I mean, it's everything they could have asked for. And then in addition to that, just the fact that the Taliban has all of that, the amount of equipment they have makes them like it's one of the most powerful stashes of military weaponry in the world. Like, it's incredible how much we left behind. So those three things to me, those are all really imminent dangers.
Yeah, and I would say too that probably one of the biggest issues that we're going to see is just what they're doing on the ground. Because I know just yesterday we were talking about the helicopter joyride where they were just lifting people into the air and just flying around willy-nilly. And so we can joke about that all day and make it, Taliban piñata, whatever. But we literally just gave them a bunch of military equipment that they're just going to use to have this ironclad grip, because originally it's like these ragtag group of people and they have acid and guns and they're footmen, but now they have these huge tanks and they have planes and all of these things. And so what became this little tiny issue now is a huge one because they have 2 decades worth of our equipment.
Yeah. I read an op-ed from, I believe, Neil Ferguson from the UK that basically said that the Taliban now has more attack helicopters than the UK government, which is just like incredible.
Yeah, and now kind of what I want to ask you guys is, what should the U.S. do now? Should the U.S. military be launching airstrikes? Should they just leave this alone? Or what steps should the U.S. military be taking right now to assure that this basically trade that's going on is limited as much as possible?
I mean, there's the we need to be doing airstrikes. Like they can't, if we hit them as hard as we can hit them, there's nothing they can do about it, and they're not going to hit back. But unfortunately, Biden is just never going to do that. So we're just gonna let them play with their brand new shiny toys, and I guess we're all going to have to see the consequences in the next decade or so.
Yeah, and I think the first step is, number one rule, not negotiating with terrorists, because now we bent to their deadlines, and then we also gave them goodie bags, as Cameron just said. And so I just think that we've lost the backbone. We see people hanging up on citizens that are overseas. This is completely irresponsible.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to look up irresponsible in the dictionary, these are the kind of pictures that should be there. That's what you should see, because this is just absurd for the leading nation in the world.
Yeah. And, in terms of the U.S. government's incompetence, it knows no bounds. And there are some reports, there's some intel that indicates that, at least one of the Kabul suicide bombings could have been prevented, but unfortunately was
yes. Yeah, so I just want to be really, really clear with you guys so that you all know exactly what's going on. So I'm going to preface this with the statement that this is a report. It hasn't been confirmed. However, I felt, and we all felt kind of during our meeting today, that this was something that was worth discussing.
Yes.
And so this is also really damning for the Biden administration if it turns out to be true eventually. So this is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere Affairs, Roger Pardo-Morar. And he went on air on this television station and basically said that the U.S. had knowledge of the man who went to bomb these people and supposedly had a drone tracing him and could have taken the shot. And even though they had the shot on this guy, it was denied to take him down, which is crazy. So this is what he said. He said, "What is being said by the people who were involved in this is that the Department of Defense already knew who the bomber was and when the Kabul attack would happen, and that a Predator drone had a lock on him, okay? And they refused to grant permission to fire upon that bomber." So this is what he's saying on this news source. And again, I don't know where he's getting this from, but it's just the fact of the matter is that if this is legitimate, it just shows what America is doing on the world stage.
Right. Yeah. And, even if it's not necessarily legitimate, it's at this point,
Yeah.
How are we supposed to trust the Biden administration?
Yeah.
After all they've done, after all the obfuscating and all the lies and the mistruths, it's just, we can't trust them at this point.
Exactly. And Roger himself goes on to kind of highlight that. He said, permission was requested, and it was denied permission to shoot this guy. Why? Because we are in the process of negotiating with the Taliban, who aren't even in control of their own government or their own people. And so how are we as Americans sitting back at home supposed to trust the idea that this wasn't legit? Because Fox News reporter Jennifer Griffin disputed these claims on Twitter and said, the problem with this report is that it is not true. Spoke to multiple senior leaders today in a chain of command, and I am told on authority that this did not happen. On record from Jen McKenzie Spock's Captain Bill Urban, this is not true. It never happened. And again, as our writer pointed out, Kip Jones, he said she's quoting the Pentagon, but the Pentagon is the one responsible for the mess. So if you already know you're facing a media disaster, this would just be icing on the cake, and it would make sense to bury it.
Yeah, I'll say this, whether a report's true, not true, I'm pretty sure that there might have been at least some degree of information that the U.S. government had. I don't know that, but if I was hearing this report, this is just my initial thoughts on this, is the people that were killed in that suicide bombing, the service members, they were all right around our age.
Yeah.
And if I'm a family member of one of those service members right now, hearing this report, I'd be pretty upset right now. And I'd also be pretty upset if I was a friend or family member of one of the nearly 200 Afghans that were killed, if I knew there was a way that this could have been stopped.
And another little tidbit, if my memory serves me correctly, I may be a little off with this, but I believe a lot of military intelligence officials, they knew that ISIS-K was going to be a threat pretty immediately if the Taliban was to take over. So there were reports that there could be ISIS-K attacks if we don't get out of there quick, if we don't guard or if we don't protect ourselves. And they knew that as soon as the Taliban took control, all of the hundreds of ISIS-K and Al-Qaeda members were going to be released from prisons.
Now,
across the
something
country.
that's important to point out here is even though in the Western world we kind of view all these terrorist groups under one umbrella, ISIS-K and the Taliban do not like each other.
No.
They are enemies. So I think to understand that there is nuance kind of within that is super important to recognize, especially as we're looking into what Afghanistan will look like in the coming years, where it's not going to be all the terrorists that are going to come together and sing Kumbaya. That's definitely not what's going to be happening here. And what's going to happen is the middleman, the civilians, the innocent civilians, are going to be the ones who are going to be hurt the most by this. So I think this is all something that we have to keep in mind with these different things. And U.S. intelligence is probably going to keep tabs on a lot of this stuff. Of course, now that we're out of Afghanistan, then probably not nearly as much. But the affairs in Afghanistan are going to continue to get worse, and there will be more bloodshed in the process.
And just because we won't have troops on the ground doesn't mean we won't be interfering. There's already reports coming out that we have some interest in helping the Taliban in their fight against ISIS-K, which is just, it's incredible if we if we help exacerbate the situation there.
It's just going to get worse and worse. And just kind of to circle back to like the crux of the issue, I think it is a really, really sad day when we're talking about a report that may or may not be true, because we honestly don't know who to believe at this point. It's a sad day for Americans when we can't even trust our own intelligence. And I think that is incredibly sad when you consider that we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 and the Taliban is going to be flying their flag over Afghanistan. And I think that that's ultimately really sad because now we're seeing this full circle. And I think it came down to Joe Biden wanting to say, hey, look, I ended the Afghanistan war before the 20th anniversary. And it's like, no, you didn't. You may have ended this war, but you're creating a new one.
Yeah. And we don't even know, all the damage that's done. We're not going to know for several more years to come. So.
Yeah. Well, to end on a lighter note, this has become a new theme with me. I like to find you guys some really exclusive footage. So here I found another set of exclusive footage of the Biden administration handling foreign affairs versus the Trump administration.
Ooh, it's kind of cold. Oh, here. Take my jacket.
I love you.
God, we are such the perfect couple.
cold too.
Well, damn, Jackie, I can't control the weather.
I think that's your best one yet. Definitely with the ones that I've been a part of.
Oh, yeah. So,
But
man.
yeah, on that note, we're getting to the end here on this episode of WJ Live. Thank you guys so much for joining us. If you really want to help us out, if you want to help us do the work that we do, tell truth from a Christian conservative perspective, please consider subscribing to the Western Journal at westernjournal.com/join. You can go there. You can get exclusive content. You can join our mug club. You can get one of these guys, which, they look pretty cool. Please just consider doing that. It helps us fight back against big tech. We don't have to rely on, the advertising money we get on social media platforms. Instead, we can rely solely on you funding us directly. And that's the best possible way to do it. Also, make sure to subscribe to us on youtube.com at youtube.com/WJLive. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell. YouTube makes it really hard. They don't want you to see our videos, so make sure you hit subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when new episodes come out. We're also available anywhere you find your audio podcasts. Look up WJ Live. And for Cameron, for Tara, for me, that's it for this episode of WJ Live. Thank you so much for joining us today.